With the release of the Poppy Playtime Chapter 4 teaser trailer, we're introduced to this new black sheep character. Her name is Baba Chops, and she is one of the nightmare critters. After the release of the teaser trailer, Bob Entertainment started to do daily reveals of the other nightmare critters. Each nightmare critter has their own unique design, scent, and character description. With this in mind, this does raise an intriguing question. What challenges will the nightmare critters bring forth in Chapter 4? I'm here to answer that question and more in this video. So sit back, relax, and let's get right into it. To understand how each nightmare critter will challenge us in Chapter 4, we need to do an in-depth analysis of each nightmare critter, starting with Baba Chops. When looking at Baba Chops, she is a black sheep that has a stark white face, hooves, and triangular shaped ears. She possesses two large white buck teeth on her upper lip, which are similar to those of cartoon rabbits. She wears a skull pendant, which represents death and mortality. Her scent is anise. The scent of anise, similar to that of black licorice, adds a touch of mystery and appeal to the fragrance, which matches up with Baba perfectly. Now, let's move on to Baba Chops' character description. When reading her character description, it says she's the black sheep of the bunch. Baba prefers to keep her space, like a lot of space, too much space. She can be distant, quiet, low energy, and it usually requires a lot of coaxing to get her out of the house. Luckily for her, she has some very persistent friends. She usually perks up after a while, but the next day, we're right back to the same tune. From reading Baba Chops' character description, there are three key details that highlight her character. Those key details are black sheep, too much space, and distant, quiet, low energy. Let's start with the first detail, black sheep. The definition of black sheep is a person who has done something bad that brings embarrassment or shame to his or her family. Given this definition and Baba being described as the black sheep of the bunch, this could mean that not only is Baba troubled and violent, but that we'll end up in her home by accident and have to fight her in order to escape. The Chapter 4 teaser trailer hinted this by showing us a dog day plush that was navigating her space and getting attacked by her. Moving on to the second detail, too much space. This could mean that she prefers to be left alone. Another thing it could mean is that we have to keep our distance from Baba Chops and stay quiet at all times. If we don't, then things will turn bad very quickly. For the third detail, distant, quiet, low energy, this could describe how Baba Chops lurks around the factory. She keeps her distance, stays quiet, and uses minimum energy in order to stay out of sight and attack when the time is right. So by taking all these details that we covered on Baba, Baba would challenge us by attacking us from the shadows when we get too close to her territory. We would have to complete a puzzle or overcome an obstacle that stands in the way in order to get away from her. If we fail, then it's game over. Now that we covered how Baba Chops would challenge us in the game, let's move on to the next nightmare critter, Icky Licky. When looking at Icky Licky, he is a yellow and black poison dart frog who wears a biohazard sign pendant. The biohazard sign pendant represents the presence of a biological hazard. He has a coffee scent, which tells us that he's very energetic and fast-paced in nature. Now that we've covered his scent, let's move on to his character description. When reading his character description, it says Icky's the type of kid to fall behind in a relay race and immediately pin it on a sore knee, even when that's not the case. He's the very definition of a poor sport. Even though he's naturally talented, he's constantly challenging everyone on absolutely everything, and usually without the outcome he expects. Don't worry, he has an excuse ready. From reading Icky Licky's character description, there are two key details to pull from it. Those key details are his competitive nature and constant challenges. With these two key details, Icky could constantly challenge the player with time-based reaction puzzles. With Icky's energetic, fast-paced nature and his poor sportsmanship, he could challenge us to races, and just when he's about to lose, he either changes the rules or comes up with some sort of excuse in order to win. And the more we win these challenges, the more aggressive Icky becomes. So we'll most likely have multiple encounters with him in Chapter 4. With Icky Licky now covered, let's move on to Rabie Baby. When looking at Rabie Baby, she is a Honduran white bat. Her features extend to pink wing membranes, hind limbs, and ears, while a touch of magenta graces her forelimbs, talons, and around her eyes. She wears a blood drop pendant, which could be a play on vampires and her species. She has a bubblegum scent. Bubblegum is sweet, fruity, and berry-like. This tells us that her actions at first may seem sweet and innocent, when in reality, they're not. Plus, bubblegum is very sticky and clingy. Knowing this tells us exactly how Rabie Baby is going to operate in Chapter 4. Once she's locked onto us, it's going to be very difficult for us to get away from her. Now, let's cover Rabie Baby's character description. When reading her character description, it says Rabie Baby couldn't keep a secret if her life depended on it. If there's one thing in the world she loves, it's gossiping, and she's very practiced at it. She has no concept of privacy or boundaries, and if she's in the room, you can bet she's eavesdropping on someone. Don't worry, if she ever runs out of juicy secrets to talk about, she'll just make some up. From reading Rabie Baby's character description, there are two key details to pull from it. Those key details details are her gossiping and clinginess. Let's start with the first detail, her gossiping. This detail is very important because Rabie Baby could spread rumors and secrets to us and our allies to not only mess with our heads, but to also turn our allies against us. In this case, mind games. This could also be followed with the second detail, her clinginess. Her clinginess may seem like it's no big deal, but since she likes to eavesdrop on everyone, chances are that she could spread information about us and our allies to the other nightmare critters. In a way, she's like a spy who's ready to cause chaos to us whenever she can. Now that we covered Rabie Baby, let's move on to Allister Gator. When looking at Allister Gator, he is an alligator characterized by lime green scales that complement his long reptilian tail and wears a crossbone pendant. The crossbone pendant represents death and danger. He has a sandalwood scent, which can be described as calm, earthy, and relaxing. Now let's go over Allister's character description. When reading his character description, it says Allister's an all-around lazy guy. He's chill, sure, but if he could, he'd spend all day in the water doing pretty much nothing. He isn't a fan of the whole put in effort and see that effort rewarded bit. He's much more a believer of the philosophy, good things have to come to me eventually. I just need to wait around for it. He's still waiting. From reading Allister's character description, there are two key details that stand out. Those key details are his laziness and patience. Let's start with the first detail, his laziness. According to his character description, Allister Gator is the slacker of the nightmare critters. He possesses a laid-back attitude and is often coerced by his friends to participate in activities, but he lacks drive and ambition. If given the chance, he would happily loaf off in a body of water and do nothing productive whatsoever, which actually pairs well with his sandalwood scent, considering that sandalwood is calm, earthy, and relaxing. However, just because he's lazy doesn't mean that he's not dangerous. Perhaps his laziness is a disguise for something far more sinister, which then leads us to our second detail, his patience. Allister is probably going to be the type of enemy who's going to wait on us to make a mistake. He'll wait for things to happen rather than putting in effort and seeing that effort making things happen instead. After all, his whole philosophy is that good things have to come to me eventually. This is also supported by the fact that alligators in real life are ambush predators. They'll wait, and when an opportunity presents itself, that's when they'll strike. This is most likely what we're going to see from Allister. He'll use his laid-back attitude and patience to create fear while we navigate flooded areas of the Playtime Cove factory. Once we make a mistake, that's when he'll strike. All in all, Allister Gator will be a very terrifying challenge for us. With Allister Gator now out of the way, let's move on to Simon Smoke. When looking at Simon Smoke, he's a red dragon characterized by light red scales that complement his long reptilian tail. He houses yellow-tailed spikes and two curved horns, and he wears a yellow rectangular earring on his left ear. His features extend to white wing membranes and underbelly and ears, while a touch of crimson red grazes his talons, mane, and wing bones. He wears a $sign pendant, which could be a reference to how many medieval dragons like to hoard treasure. He has a wood smoke scent, which can be tricky to narrow down. The best thing that I can think of wood smoke being associated with would be fire and destruction. Fire and destruction could relate to how Simon marked his territory in the factory. Now, let's touch base on Simon's character description. When reading his character description, it says Simon Smoke knows he's cool and popular, and he makes sure nobody ever forgets it. Whether showing off for friends or just bragging about one of his accomplishments, it's always a popularity contest with him. Almost always, he wins. In truth, he's a colossal jerk, but he does have a knack for getting away with being one. From reading Simon Smoke's character description, there are three key details to pull from it. Those key details are his cool vibe, popularity, and arrogance. Let's start with the first detail, his cool vibe. When you look at Simon, he's the type of guy who wants everyone to know that he's the coolest guy around. The second detail, popularity, also pairs along with the first detail. You could say that he's someone who wants constant attention from everyone to stand out from the rest. Moving on to the third detail, his arrogance. According to his character description, Simon Smoke is the popular kid of the nightmare critters. An narcissistic, pompous individual, Simon frequently gloats about his numerous accomplishments or shows off to his friends. So Simon's constant need to show off that he's the best in everything, his competitive nature, and arrogance suggest that he will be an active antagonist in Chapter 4. So how would Simon challenge us in Chapter 4? Well, Simon could place traps or create obstacles around the factory, so that when we do stumble into them, it'll be made very clear to us that it's his doing. I would imagine that Simon would challenge us to complete puzzles or go up against him in races, similar to what Icky Licky would do. He would even brag about how we'll never be able to beat his challengers or how he's better than us in everything. However, while his arrogance is his greatest strength, it can also be seen as his greatest weakness. Imagine, during a puzzle or a race, while he's insulting us or being full of himself, we inflate him to fall more into his ego, which we can use as a distraction to buy us time to outsmart him. Of course, knowing how prideful and cocky Simon is, he won't take too kindly to losing to someone who's not as cool or as popular as him. Now that we've talked about Simon Smoke, let's move on to Poe. Poe is a raven characterized by a violet indigo plumage that complements their thin eyebrows and expressive black eyes, which are furrowed into a permanent glare. Their features extend to a dark purple beak, belly and hind limbs. They wear a thundercloud pendant with a yellow lightning bolt emerging from the bottom. Their pendant probably represents a storm, and we know that storms are unpredictable and dangerous. This will help us understand how Poe will challenge us in chapter 4, but we'll come back to that later. Their scent is cinnamon. Cinnamon is often described as warm, spicy, and sweet, with woody undertones. It exudes a sense of coziness and comfort. Poe looks to be a broody and dark character. Their scent being cinnamon could mean that under all that gloominess, there is more to Poe than meets the eye. When reading Poe's character description, it says Poe hates the sun and thinks it is a cruel trick of nature that the world needs it in the first place. Most comfortable in the dark, they spend their nights hanging around graveyards, listening to music and feeling vaguely angry at nothing in particular. They insist it isn't a phase. From reading Poe's character description, there are two key details to focus on to understand how Poe will challenge us. Those key details are their hate for the sun and their cold, dark persona. Let's start with the first detail, Poe's cold, dark persona. According to Poe's character description, Poe is the brooder of the nightmare critters and is content in staying in darkness and abhorring the sun's glaring existence, viewing it as merely a cruel trick of nature. Poe is an introverted individual who has a nocturnal nature. Poe possesses a strong affinity for hanging around graveyards while listening to music. Poe prefers to be surrounded by the dead than by the living, further added to Poe's brooding nature. Poe also suffers from anger issues, often fearing irate emotions with no discernible target or cause. So Poe's broodiness could be a cover-up for his anger issues. And what's better way for Poe to blow off some steam than by messing with us? Now that we have an understanding of the first detail, let's move on to the second detail, Poe's hatred for the sun. As stated before, Poe hates the sun and prefers to hang around graveyards in dark areas. And what I'm thinking is that Poe could use the shadows to lurk and watch our every move, which would instill a sense of fear in us, a fear that everywhere we go, we're always being watched. One moment we see Poe, and the next moment, Poe's gone. Poe could even use the shadows to calculate his next move or lure us towards traps to throw us off completely. Going back to what I said about Poe's thundercloud pendant with a yellow lightning bolt, it could represent storms and how they're unpredictable and dangerous. This is most likely how Poe is going to operate in chapter 4. Poe is first going to mess with us psychologically by using the shadows to instill fear. Poe is going to be the type of enemy who isn't going to kill you on the spot, but instead is going to lure you towards your demise. And as soon as we progress into a deep dark area of the factory and let our guard down, that's when Poe will strike with anger and ferocity. Now that we've covered Poe, let's move on to Touille. When looking at Touille, he is a rat that has musty gray fur. His features extend to a light silver outer mouth and belly, while a touch of salmon pink graces his nose, tail, and the insides of his circular shaped ears. His hands and feet are a darker shade of gray. He possesses 2 front incisors. What's cool about Touille's name is that it's a direct reference to the film Ratatouille, as his name is taken from the last 7 letters of the title. In the film, there is a rat named Remy who has a knack for cooking and dreams of becoming a chef. However, Touille has a knack for garbage. Touille wears a captivating sea blue fishbone pendant. His pendant probably symbolizes a love of fishing and outdoors. At first, it seems weird, but it actually makes sense for Touille's character. Imagine navigating around some dark, trashy areas of the Playtime Code factory, and then all of a sudden, you see Touille fishing around for different types of garbage, which I'll touch base on later. Touille has a petrichor scent. Petrichor is a deep, earthy scent, and usually the smell of petrichor is strongest after a dry period when it rains lightly. Touille's scent being petrichor could symbolize his connection to the factory's deep, gritty, damp, and forgotten world. Now, let's move on to Touille's character description. When reading Touille's character description, it says Touille, it's pronounced Touille, is a self-proclaimed trash rodent. When he's not busy eating and collecting garbage, he's a lively conversationalist. He talks a lot, which is made all the more surprising by him having shockingly little to say. If you ever need someone to provide insightful commentary or some random piece of junk, Touille is your guy. From reading Touille's character description, there are 3 key details to pull from it in order to figure out how he'll challenge us in chapter 4. Those key details are trash rodent, conversationalist, and insightful commentary. Let's start with the first detail, trash rodent. With this detail, I think it means that Touille is a scavenger, scourging around dark areas of the factory picking through trash. At first, it doesn't seem like something that we would overlook, considering that Touille is just collecting junk. But really, Touille is looking for specific types of trash that he can use to put together to create traps and set them up for us to fall into. Of course, in order for Touille to pull this off, he needs to distract us. And what better way in doing so than by having a conversation with us? Which leads us to our second and third details, conversationalist and insightful commentary. According to his character description, Touille is a high-spirited chatterbot. Any chance he gets, he will contribute to a conversation. Unfortunately for him, his conversational skills are extremely inadequate. As a result, he can neither adapt to changing discussion topics nor add to an existing topic. It's interesting that for someone like Touille who has a lot to talk about, it feels like there are some things he's not saying. Like, what is he looking for and what are his true intentions? I imagine that while we're exploring the deep dark parts of the factory, we're going to run into Touille picking through trash and he'll say some dialogue that won't seem to be all that threatening. But really, his dialogue will act as insightful commentary, a taste of what is yet to come. In a way, Touille's creating a false sense of security security in order for us to let our guard down. Another thing to think about is that since Touille has been in the factory for a very long time, he would know the ins and outs of the trashy areas that we'll be exploring. This tells us that he's going to use the environment around him to his advantage. He'll lurk in the shadows, collect specific trash to create traps for us to fall into, and even hide within the trash and attack us when we're vulnerable. All in all, Touille is looking to be a very talkative character whose fascination for trash and knowledge of his environment is going to bring tension, uneasiness, and dark terrors to us in many unique ways. Now that we've wrapped up Touille, let's talk about Maggie Mako. When looking at Maggie Mako, she is a Mako shark who has turquoise skin. She has sharp teeth and teal claws, feet, head fin, and tail, while a touch of white graces her lower jaw, belly, and markings surrounding her eyes. Maggie wears a shark tooth pendant. Her pendant probably hints at her love for food. Her scent is chocolate. Chocolate is sweet, delightful, and tasty. You're probably wondering why her scent is chocolate. After all, chocolate isn't exactly the healthiest food to eat. Well, considering that Maggie is a food lover and her scent is chocolate, her eating habits probably consist mostly of sugary substances, suggesting that she possesses a serious sweet tooth. Plus, chocolate can be psychologically addictive. Chocolate often contains sugar, fat, and salt, which can trigger addictive behaviors. The sugar in chocolate can make it more enjoyable, but too much sugar can lead to cravings. This also tells us that she doesn't care about healthy eating or balanced diets. She only cares about satisfying her hunger with sugary foods that give her gratification. In a way, she has a rebellious nature and does and eats what she wants. Now, let's go over Maggie's character description. When reading Maggie's character description, it says Maggie is always thinking about her belly. She's happiest with food in her mouth, and believe us, she's not picky. She loves sweets, but veggies, yuck. Don't be surprised if she takes your health eating habits advice with a dabble of sugar, some chocolate syrup, whipped cream, and a big cherry on top, all while laughing at you profusely. From reading her character description, there is one key detail to pull from it to help us understand how she's going to challenge us in chapter 4. That key detail being her love for food. Let's break it down. As I said before, Maggie loves to eat food, especially sweets, but veggies, absolutely not. Maggie abhors vegetables and could care less about healthy eating. In fact, she will openly mock anyone who attempts to give her advice on this topic. Her obsession with food and her lack of care for healthy eating reminds us a lot of Piggy Piggy. However, unlike Piggy Piggy, who loves to eat healthy, Maggie does not. But let's stay focused on Maggie. Maggie's obsession with food can make for an interesting chase sequence within the game. The chase sequence will happen in an area that has lots of food. In this case, a rundown cafeteria. For Maggie, her goal will be to catch the player and eat them. In order for the player to fend her off, we would have to distract her with food or sugary substances or have her fall into well-timed traps. However, even with these strategies, Maggie would start to catch on, and with her driving force being her obsession for food as well as her unsatisfied cravings, she'll become more aggressive, faster, and ruthless. And the only way to deal with Maggie will be to outsmart her. One thing is for certain, Maggie will bring us terrors that we'll never forget. And with that, we've covered every single nightmare critter and the challenges that they'll bring us in chapter 4. If you guys have your own takes as to how the nightmare critters will challenge us in Poppy Playtime Chapter 4, let me know down in the comments. And if you enjoyed today's video, I would really appreciate if you could leave a like down below and subscribe to my channel so you won't miss any of my future videos. Thanks for watching, and as always, stay safe, positive, be it for another, and remember, the grind never stops, and I'll see you guys in the next one.